Hello, this is Kim McAllister, and we're going to talk about Chapter 16, about how to identify and select an information system. Now, I can hear a lot of you. Yes, I can hear you from your screen, from your computer. Oh, no, I really can't. But I can hear you saying, why do I need to do this? I will never be the person who selects this. And maybe you won't, but you never know. I know a lot of you are managers and are in positions of significant authority. I know that most of you are actively working in places that use an electronic health record and other types of information systems at work. And so even if you're not the person who is going to make the decision, you still need to know how the decision is made so that you can participate in the process. In the past, a lot of times hospitals and other organizations would make these decisions without consulting clinicians at all, and that really didn't go very well, as you can imagine. So most places now try to involve the clinicians. And so if you have an understanding of how all of this works, then you can be a part of this. Also, if you decide to become a nurse informaticist, then you will be heavily involved in this process, so now you'll know why and how, what to do. So there are a lot of options for healthcare systems as far as their electronic system, their information system. And so you have to, first of all, take a look at your organization and consider what your needs are on that level before you even begin to look at other systems. You need to think about the size of your organization, how many people are going to be accessing it, and how many patients are you going to be taking care of. So you need to look at the size of the actual physical size of what you're going to be including in the system. And then you want to look at the type. What kind of system do you need? And then the complexity. So the complexity has a lot to do with who all is using it and how big your organization is. But also, is your system going to interact with with physician offices? Is it going to include just the hospital? Is it going to have a patient portal? Are patients going to be able to input information? And then you want to think about what unique cultural aspects there are within your organization or the potential people that you're going to be serving and working with. Is this system, going to be able to work with all of that? First of all, you need to know what your strategic vision is. What is the organization's vision? What are you doing? Are you profit or nonprofit? Who all is involved in your organization? Are you serving the underserved? Are you serving everybody? Are you a cutting-edge hospital who is taking patients with really great insurance? What are you? What kind of organization are you? And then you need to look at your mission and value statement. What is your mission? What is your values? What is it that you're trying to do? What do you do as an organization? And then you need to look at information technology, strategic vision, and plan. So all of this has to match and go together. So this is where the organizational leaders sit down with your IT leaders and talk to each other and find out what it is we're going to do here. So a part of that vision and alignment is looking at evaluation of systems. What kind of systems do we currently have? Which systems are working? Which systems aren't? What systems should we add? And then we need to look at the development process. And what is the state of the development process? Where are we in the process? Do we want a brand new system? Do we need to update our current system? Do we need to just start all over from scratch? What's going to work for us? What basic structure do we need the system to have? What kind of functionality do we need? And then what is the impact of the system going to be? Who all is going to be using it? We also have to look at the life cycle of the system. we need to know how long should we expect this to take. How long is it going to take us to figure out what we need? How long is it going to take to develop what we need? And then how long will implementation take? You know, we have to develop a system, purchase a system, develop our own system, and then we have to have a schedule for implementation. There has to be a time when that comes in. So that's going to also include training and getting people on board with it, and how is this all going to go? We need to have a series of sequential or logic steps for how this is all going to take place, because it's not just going to happen by itself. So we want to look at the phases of the system's development life cycle. So we're going to take a look at that. So when we have a systems development life cycle, the first thing we're going to do is plan. We're going to figure out what we're going to do. And I talked with my sister Holly. Say hi to Holly. Hi, Holly. She is a certified project manager. And there are certified project managers in healthcare and in other fields, and they're really, really great to have when you're going to start a project of this magnitude. So I called her up and said, well, what do you do? And she said, the first thing you have to do is identify all the stakeholders. Who all is going to be affected by this change? And then you have to sit down and work together and figure out what everybody needs. So you're going to do an analysis of the requirements. That's going to include talking to all of the stakeholders. Find out, what does the system do now that you like? What does the system that we have now not do that it should do? You have to look at, from the clinician standpoint, what do you think we need to provide safe care? What kind of things do we need to do? How much of patient care is involved? What all do you want it to do? Do you want it to integrate with medication systems, with the EHR, with supplies, with accreditation requirements? What all do we need it to do? And then you have to look at HR and financial and your business office and billing and your vendor management, and look at your supply chain. So there are a lot of things that you may never see in your role as a clinician that are also included in the system. So everyone has to sit down and figure out what it needs to do. And then you have to design what it is that you want. Most places will have a vendor at this point put all of this in place, but you have to develop what it is you want. And then there's the implementation phase, and this is where you start putting the new system in place. And implementation doesn't happen very quickly either. You have to have a period of integration and testing, and this is where you start to put the system's not quite live yet, but you start to run the system and see and test everything out. Does everything work together? Does it interface, have the human computer interface that you need? And then after it has passed all the series of tests, then you have the acceptance, installation, and deployment phase. This is what's known as going live. And this is the point where, if you have involved everybody, gotten the stakeholders involved, talked with people, have a lot of input, and you've listened to people and kind of listened to advice, then you'll start to have acceptance. And then the equipment and all is installed and put into use. And understand, nothing ever goes the way that it's absolutely supposed to. There are always hiccups and problems along the way. It's just really important that all of your stakeholders communicate with each other and have a pathway to communicate the problems and a way of resolution. And then the final part of the phase is your evaluation of the system and maintenance. And this will continue throughout the life cycle of the whole project. And after you get to the maintenance phase, then you're going to continually evaluate. And then when the system is at the end of its life cycle, then you go all the way back up to the beginning again and plan for the next system. So when we talk about how we're going to identify the system requirements, this is where you take a complete inventory of everything that your system that you have currently does. You also want to take a look at what paper documents that you have. We try to be completely paperless, but in some instances there is paperwork that has to be signed or completed. So you need to look at what all of those are and could find out if this new system is going to have a way of eliminating some of those. You want to interview the frontline staff. That's like, for the electronic health record, that's us. That's when we're taking care of patients. We need to be able to say, look, this is what it needs to do. These are the things that work right or work don't right. So what I hope that you'll do is take a moment to write down all of the things that you do like and that you don't like about your information system where you work, because this could be valuable information down the road. So take a moment to think about that. You want to take some samples of reports that your current system produces for you, and then look at what your accreditation requirements are and other mandatory reports that you have to complete. Does this system meet all those criteria? What other reporting would be beneficial to have? This is the time to make a note of that so that you can make sure that those reports are created. And then you want to develop process and flow maps, and we'll look at some in just a second. And this will tell you how this information needs to flow. And the best way to do that is in a concept map type format. And we'll look at that in a second. And then you want to look at all of your different standards, policies, regulations, accreditation requirements. Pull out the list of everyone who has some kind of hand in accrediting and authenticating your organization, because you want to make sure that what you've got is going to meet all of those requirements. So in your slides, I gave you a couple of slides of these flow charts. We're going to pop over here and look at them in a bigger screen. And here you have, this is actually your textbook just in Vital Shelf. This is a multiple sclerosis clinic, and you can see here that it begins with the checking in the patient, the intake, where the intake forms are signed, the handoff from the nurse to the physician or providers, the different tests that are done and then reported back to the provider. And then the patient goes to check out and makes a follow-up appointment. And then what kind of in-between appointment activities are there? And then back to appointments and so forth. Over here you have a CF clinic. And cystic fibrosis involves a lot of different factors. And so you have the appointment, the check-in, your pre-appointment test for your different issues there, your patient intake, medication list, and then you may have some social worker counseling, definitely some diet counseling, so on and so forth. And then, so you see, this is how this particular clinic functions and manages their information. Now, this one's fun. This is just looking at a patient with a chronic illness. How is this patient managed? And you can see over here you have the patient, and on this side you have the providers. And so you have your administrative assistant sending messages to and from the patient and monitoring the patient portal and generating letters and appointment requests, medication refills, and so on. And outside this flow chart, the patient went to the ER and they were admitted, so there would be a whole nother chart for the hospital, and you have all your insurance information, all the things that the nurse does, all the things the provider does. So you can see this is a very thorough map of everything that's going on there with the patient and with the information. So when you are trying to figure out the information that you need for considering the new system, you want to interview all the different stakeholders. And these are just some sample questions that you could ask. And there's some more in your book that you can look at. And this is where you ask what the strengths are and how the system makes care safe. Is it easy to manage? Which things don't you like? Is the system difficult to use and why? Ask people what would make it better. What is their vision for a system that would work well? Do you think that there are some things missing from this system that would help? This is a really good question. And is there anything about our current system that puts patients at risk? This is also a very important question. So you want to think about patient safety. Last week we talked about problems with information and privacy, and so we certainly want to make sure that is maintained, that we meet all those regulations. We want to be sure that patient care, of course, comes first. We want to be sure this is efficient. We don't want to create more work and slow down care. It needs to work well with our IT system that we have. This is why we involve IT in it. For the clinicians, we never want to minimize the clinician role. We want to implement something that's going to guide and protect care, that will raise alarms when alarms need to be made. And we want to be sure that it records the patient data correctly. Now we're going to talk about RFIs. RFIs are a request for information. And this is something the organization is going to send out to potential vendors. They're going to put this request out there and say, hello, we need a new system, and we need you to send us information about your system. And I pulled up a sample one. This is not for an EHR, but it's still an RFI. And with an RFI, you want to state who you are and what this is, and this is a request for information. And this just explains what it is. And so here you would say our 200-bed hospital in the neighborhood of Make-Believe has a need for a new information system. We're a nonprofit hospital. We have a small staff, and you would just explain what it is you are. And then you want to state very clearly when you need it, and then where people can send responses to, or if they have questions about the RFI before they respond, who do they talk to? Also, they'll give some background and the purpose and the information that they want. And this tells how to send it and so forth. So this is an example of an RFI. A really cool site is, again, the healthit.gov. And there's a reference to this in your book also, so you can find the site there. But this is one for an RFI or RFP for a electronic healthcare system. And this gives you some really good tools about it. Like here's a vendor evaluation matrix tool to figure out how you're going to evaluate your vendor, and you can download that. And it has some estimated cost of ownership. Here's a health information technology toolkit for physician offices, which is really cool. All kinds of good stuff that you can find there about that. So if you find yourself actually doing this process, take a look here. It'll give you some good information. And here, I just want to go back to the book. And this is where your book talks about the RFI. Get it back again so you can read it. Okay. And again, just like we saw on the example, you're looking for the information and what you need. Now, an RFI is non-binding. This is not a contract. You're just trying to communicate and tell people we're looking for this and we want information from you. And after you get that information in, then you're going to narrow down the potential vendors to a handful of selections. And you're going to contact that vendor and ask them where their systems are in place, and you're going to arrange a site visit. You're going to go to other hospitals or organizations that are similar to yours that are already employing their system. And you're going to go and take a visit and talk with people and find out how this is working and see how the system works and is integrated where they are. So once you identify your vendor, then you're going to issue a request for a proposal. And this is more formal. This is where they will indicate, they'll basically be giving you a bid, and the actual negotiation and the bid may come directly from the RFP. There's more to think about than just cost. You have to make sure that all of this is going to work with your organization. And you're going to be doing some negotiation here. You want to look at things like, what kind of experience has this vendor had? How long have they been in business? How many systems have they developed? How many organizations are using it? Is this vendor similar in mission and philosophy to your organization? Are you a small informal organization and they're very large and very structured? Are they kind of casual and you're more bureaucratic? You want to make sure that there's a match between the vendor and your agency. What about their staff strength? What kind of strengths do they have? Do they have the staff to handle the size of your project? What kind of market and industry understanding do they have? Do they have a lot of experience in health IT? Do they understand your particular system and what your particular needs are? And what are some of the costs and what are some of the advantages to them? These are some companies that do research on the different health IT firms. And if you are indeed beginning to do some research on this to consider a system, contact these people, go onto their websites and get information from them about, oops. And you can kind of see there, it's sort of like the Consumer Reports of healthcare IT. So after you have sent out your RFPs and you're waiting to get those proposals back, you want to make a decision on how you're going to score them. How are you going to evaluate those responses? You don't want to wait until you get the responses and then just look at them without having some kind of criteria. There has to be a way of evaluating them. And then you need to make a list of your must-haves. It sounds very HGTV. And then the nice-to-have things. So your total cost of ownership for the system, the things you've got to know is how much is the hardware going to cost, how much is the software going to cost, and then how much is the ongoing support going to cost. And what kind of support do they have? Is it 24/7? Are there certain times when support is not going to be available? Do they have a live chat or live help? And are they only available during certain hours? You need to look at that as part of your consideration. Also, when you've selected a vendor, you need to establish a relationship. You need to talk with the people. You need to find out who your customer support people are and get to know them. You don't want to be strangers when the whole system has crashed and everything has gone wrong. You want to know exactly who to talk to, and you want to know that they will respond to you and how quickly they'll get that up. So it's very important to have a good relationship. You're going to have the system for a while, and you want to be sure that you work on that. And you also need to sit down together and decide together what is going to be our criteria for successful implementation. They may get things up and things are running and they'll say, yay, everything's great. And you're like, no, they're not, because this isn't working or that isn't working. So be sure that you're on the same page there. And then just to conclude, remember that there will be changes in the healthcare market, and you want to be sure that the system that you select is flexible enough to change with regulations. Because regulations change, we have new administrations, and administrations change things. So you want to be sure that you've picked a system that has the ability to adapt and change with the future.